Hello, hello, hello. It's Lillian Reiki here from Parent Support Network. Hope you are doing awesomely well. Coming in today with Parent Support Network TV, episode number 36. So today's topic might be a little bit sensitive for some people, for some of us parents. I know that when Andrew and I were initially confronted with this thought, that we took it quite personally. Many of you know the journey that we've had with our youngest son, who was diagnosed as a toddler with ADHD, ODD, and childhood depression, and that we've had quite a roller coaster of learning and a journey with him and with our family. And as a young teen, we hit a real brick wall in regards to the way that we were relationshiping with him and the way that he was reacting to the way that we were relationshiping with him. And as a matter of fact, the way that most adults were relationshiping with him. And you may have heard this story, but we were very fortunate to have universally met this amazing man called Frank, who became our parenting mentor for a good 18 months to 2 years that we communicated with him regularly. And he said something to us once that still hits a bit of a nerve for me sometimes. And I can imagine if I, as a parenting coach said it to another parent, it would probably hit a nerve for them. But he basically said to us, if we have a revolting child in the home, and my third book, The Revolting Child, is a result of our coaching with Frank. So revolting, in Frank's words, means to be cold, indifferent, and discourteous and adamantly resisting authority. So we definitely at that time did have a revolting child in our home, but he basically said, if you have a revolting child in your home, and he said it like this, then you are to blame. Now, blame is a pretty strong word. I might say something like, well, then you need to take some responsibility. Perhaps you need to look in the mirror. And working as a parenting strategist and coach for over 25 years now, sometimes people come to me to talk about their child or their children with the kind of mindset that my children need to be fixed, like there's a challenge with my child that needs to be fixed. And they don't always look at it from the perspective of them as the parent or caregiver. And we could be talking about educators here as well, with kids in their classrooms that they're not having great relationships with. So when things are out of sync with our thoughts, if our kids are being uncooperative, if they're being non-compliant, if they're not following the rules, if they're arguing and, being annoying with their siblings, if they're not behaving at school or not acting the way the school believes they should act, if they're perhaps being what you perceive as disrespectful, not following the rules, being a challenge, I guess, in the family, disrupting the family, causing disconnect. We often look at those challenges as a problem of the child. And I know in our very long, what I call roller coaster journey, we have come to realize that so much more of it is about how we as parents or caregivers respond to the child. So one might say, okay, well, for example, for me, I'm a parent of 2 children, 2 boys, 2 very different boys, different fathers, but that's not really relevant. 2 very different boys. My eldest son was quiet, cooperative, self-entertaining, seemed to go about life in a very calm and organized kind of way, didn't ruffle a lot of feathers. He just got on with life, and he was could have been a sullen or sometimes came across even as a sad child. He kept a lot within himself, so he wasn't an out there kind of kid. He didn't seek relationship from us in really out there ways, but that's not necessarily a good thing either, because when I reflect back on that, I guess with him, as and if you have got a quiet child, a compliant, cooperative child, sometimes because they are quiet and cooperative, and because they do, self-entertain, read or play blocks, or, our son was into Lego and reading, he would self-entertain for hours. And we would just go, phew, he's quiet. Now let's deal with the other child who's not so quiet, or he's quiet. now I can get on with some other stuff. So we didn't, just because he was the quiet one, it doesn't mean we did all the right things. Just because he didn't, ruffle feathers and cause challenges, etc., it doesn't mean that we parented him the best way that we could have. And when I look back on my parenting, in some ways, I feel like I let him down is probably a strong word. I feel somehow that I didn't really, thank you. I didn't really give him what he needed in the way that we relationship. Look what I just had dropped on my desk midway through an episode here. Some flowers from my beautiful husband. Isn't that amazing? And actually yesterday I got presented, I'm really off the track now, I got presented with this beautiful wooden handmade pen from my youngest son, which is just amazing, made of a special wood. I had a little piece of paper about it here, but I wasn't meant to be talking about that. But anyway, back to parenting. So when, our children come into this world differently, as I was saying, some are quieter, some are more intense, some demand our relationship in more outwardly ways. They demand our relationship by, as a young person trying to figure out in their world, how do they best get the relationship? So let me go back to my quiet and compliant and cooperative child. So even though he cruised through childhood and adolescence and into adulthood really well, it didn't leave him unscarred. And when I say really well, I guess it wasn't, because he went through a lot of depression. When he was a young teen, he actually was so depressed and so out of sync with his relationships within our home that he actually attempted to take his life at age, 13, which actually does not mean that he was coping well. He wasn't coping well, but we didn't see the evidence of that in the same way that we did, for example, with our son, who was out there, who demanded our attention from the get-go. So for whatever reasons, kids come into the world with different, temperaments, different personalities, just as we have. And they come into the world with different levels of intensity. Some people are quieter, more introverts, some are more extroverts, some seek, relationship in different ways. But what I came to learn was that really the key was how we reacted to a relationship with our children. We as parents, I believe, really need to look at ourselves and who we are as people, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a sister, as a daughter. We need to look at ourselves as people and, and feel good about who we are before we can really, look after or parent or guide or mentor, another person. And as a parent, we have this baby come into our lives, and we have this huge responsibility, right, to do the right thing. And often we really don't know what we're doing. It's not putting any blame on parents, right? Because often we just parent intuitively, or we parent generationally, the way that we were parented. And even though I'm getting back to what I was saying, even though I'm the same mum of two very different boys, the way that I parented them should have been according to their temperament, to their way of relationshiping and wanting to connect and relationship with us. So my eldest son missed out a lot because he was quiet, because he was self-entertaining and he was compliant and cooperative. He really didn't get the relationship that he deserved. He didn't get the acknowledgement and recognition as he was growing up for all of his greatness, for, the attributes and qualities that he had. We kind of, I feel sad saying this, but kind of took him for granted, right? Because he was a good kid, because he behaved and he was compliant. But little did we realize, or little did I realize as a mother, that he was inwardly taking in a lot of this and keeping it inward. So he wasn't hyperactive. He wasn't outwardly aggressive. He wasn't defiant. He wasn't loud. He didn't fight and squabble and, get in trouble at school. But he was dealing with his own stuff, right, inwardly. And then, of course, that affected him adversely. And a lot of that was due to the disharmony that he felt in our home after his younger brother came along, who did cause a lot of, in his thoughts, a lot of disrupt in our home. He says in the Revolting Child book, where I share all of our stories, when my eldest son shared, he actually talked about how he felt like the harmony, that we had in our home was disrupted. He felt very disconnected from our family when his younger brother came along, because everything really, changed. So, when we look at our children and we say, well, it can't be our fault because I've got two kids and one turned out this way and one turned out that way. But we as parents have to really parent our children as individuals and look at the way that they want relationship and that they gain recognition. So, for example, some kids love that real outward, Johnny, I love how you just, helped your brother with his game. You know what? That showed me that you're such an amazing kid, that you're such a thoughtful brother, and that you're kind and compassionate. And I really appreciate you for that. And so does your brother. Like, one kid might appreciate that, and another kid who's a little bit more quiet might just prefer, hey, mate, thanks so much for helping your brother out. That really just shows me how amazing you are. You're such a kind and thoughtful kid. Thank you. Like, they might, not want the loud out there kind of recognition. They might seek something a little bit more subdued, a little bit more quiet. So, when we look at our kids, and if you've got more than one child, you might compare them and say, well, this one's like that and that one's like that. And why is that? Because same parents, same household, but they're individuals, just like we're individuals, right? We respond differently to relationships that we have in our lives with other people, right? Like my sister and I, we are very different in a lot of ways. We're similar in some ways, but we're also very different. And we respond to things differently as adults. And I imagine as children we would have as well. So when we go back to that concept of, if you've got a child in your home who is, from your perception, not being compliant, not being cooperative, not being respectful, causing havoc or causing disconnect or disrupt or stress in the home, rather than looking at what is wrong with the child, rather than taking that child to a practitioner and saying, my kid's not doing this, they're doing that, they're disruptive, they can't do their schoolwork, they're not concentrating, they're fighting, they're being disruptive, they're not cooperative, rather than trying to find out what is wrong with the child, and sometimes get a diagnosis for that child, and sometimes get a recommendation for medication for that child. What I've learned through my parenting journey, and this is not for everybody, but just what I've learned through my parenting journey, is that we really need to look at, and we learned this from Frank, right? We really need to look at ourselves first as parents. So how does that child see us? Are we the type of parent who likes to control, who likes to micromanage and tell the kids what to do every 5 minutes? Are we the type of parent who maybe yells and nags and threatens? Are we the type of parent who doesn't stop and listen, who doesn't ask questions, who doesn't give the child a chance to express their point of view? Are we that type of parent who just says, I'm the parent, you're the child, you don't get a say type of thing? We have to really look at ourselves and how we're communicating and relationshiping with our kids, because from a very young age, our kids form a sense of who they are in many ways from us as their, role models as parents. So if we teach them that we relationship through anger, through yelling, through screaming, through not listening, through all of those methods, then that's how they're going to learn to communicate, right? So we can hardly blame a child if a child turns out, being aggressive or, being stressed or depressed. If we were stressed or depressed, we might be setting that example for the child. There could be some other underlying issues. We know that, stress and trauma do play a part in the way that our children act out and behave. And it could be a stress or trauma that, wasn't something obvious like, abuse or a divorce or something like that. It could be, one of, so many hundreds of different things. Like for us, I went back in our journey, and if you've heard to prior episodes, you will have heard me talk about the fact that I was medicated for a migraine when I was pregnant with my son, which caused a lot of stress for me, for my body and for me. Firstly, because I was very anti medication when I was pregnant. So it caused me stress on that level. But secondly, I sensed the stress on my baby in my body. I felt that as a mother, and that caused stress. And he was actually born stressed. The doctor who delivered him actually put him on a stress monitor because he could see as I was in labor that the baby was stressed, and he was born stressed, and he came out stressed, and he came out angry, and he came out with a mission to teach us a lot of lessons, right? Unfortunately, we weren't ready for the lessons earlier on. We didn't know, we didn't know what we now know. And the reason I'm so passionate about helping parents now is if I'd known then what I know now, then things may have been very different. We may not have had to go through so much adversity, so much pain, so much, so many challenges in our family or in our home for a good 15, 16 plus years. So it would have been great to understand that how we react and how we relationship with our kids plays a really huge part. So I want to just pose that question to you. If you have a child in your home who isn't relationshiping within the family the way that you would like them to, look at you. Look at how are you relationshiping? What energy are you giving to that child? Are you giving more of you, more energy, more connection and relationship when the kid's mucking up, therefore teaching them that the way they get connection and energy and relationship is when they muck up? Or are you looking for opportunities to show them their greatness, to highlight their strengths, to build what we in the Nurtured Heart approach called inner wealth? Are you looking for opportunities to tell them that they're an amazing human being and why? Are you looking for those opportunities, or are you focusing on the things that aren't going well, the things that aren't going right? Because it doesn't take long to get into a negative pattern, right? And kids actually learn. I've talked a lot about upside down parenting. Kids actually learn from us how to get the best relationship by how we relationship with them. So it's not to blame us parents, because and ignorance isn't an excuse, but a lot of us parents don't know what we don't know when we start parenting. And I certainly, I was 25 when I had my first son, so I was reasonably young. I had a marriage, actually, the marriage was really over before my son was born. So there was a lot of stress there for me as a mother. I separated from my first son's father when he was under a year old. So, I was a single parent predominantly. So I was just parenting intuitively, or the way that, my parents parented me. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't take parenting courses back then. I only really sought parenting advice, when things started to go really terribly wrong with our second son. So that's another lesson, actually. So don't wait until you have challenges to learn this stuff, right? Because we want to learn it. Ideally, I would love to see all parents learn the Nurtured Heart approach or something similar that aligns with you from the get-go, right? From the moment your child comes into this world, because we start relationshiping and connecting and communicating with our children, actually, even before they're born, right? Even in utero. So there's so much that we've learned now about how, our stress is and how our mindset and our, the way that we are functioning affects even our unborn child. So I could talk about this topic for so long, but I just wanted to, raise that question today about, if your child is acting inappropriately, whose responsibility is it? And if it's not the child's responsibility, then whose is it? So then who needs to do the work, and who needs to do the work on who, right? We as parents need to do the work on ourselves. We need to do the work on ourselves so that we can then be the best person that we can be, so that we can then help to parent our children the best way that we can. So I hope that makes sense. once again, just finishing off by saying it's not to judge us as parents or as caregivers or as educators even. We are always doing our best, right? We want the best for our children, but when we don't know what we don't know, we do fall into the traps of upside down parenting, of giving more energy, relationship and connection when things are going wrong. So if you want to learn more about our journey and our story, if you haven't already read the Revolting Child, A Blessing in Disguise book, you can actually download that for free on my website. You'll see my website up there, parentsupportnetwork.com.au. Just go to my website on the homepage, scroll down at the bottom. There's actually a link where you can click on that, pop your name and email in, and you will literally have this delivered into your email immediately, and you can start reading it. So yeah, so I hope that you do that. I look forward to hearing back once you've had a read of it. I've had amazing feedback from people who have read it, and you might relate to what we went through, and most importantly, you might learn from what our lessons that we had to have. So I'll leave with that today. We might continue on with this conversation next week or over the next few weeks, because there's so much that we could talk about on this. But if you've got any questions, or if you disagree with anything I've said, or want to, make a comment, please feel free to. Remember, things that I share are from my heart, from my head. It's not necessarily fact. It's just related to the journey that I've had and what I've learned in my journey so far as a parent. You may relate, you may agree, you may totally not agree, and that's totally okay as well. But I hope you got something from it either way. So thank you so much for tuning in today to episode number 36, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And in the meantime, have an awesome week. Much love to you, Lily Enrique, parenting strategist from Parent Support Network, equipping parents to enjoy happy and healthy children and relationships on purpose. And bye for now.